Controlled chaos here. I am here sitting down with Avi, the senior server engineer of Stars Reach. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks. How are you?
I'm doing really good, and I'm excited for the 14-hour test days that we get this coming Tuesday and Thursday. I'm pretty sure you've been pretty busy working to make sure everything's ready for those tests.
Some degree, but I think we've had a lot of the stuff for it ready a little bit in advance, and we're trying to work on quite a lot of things in parallel right now. So it's a busy time for us. You've seen that we have constant updates coming every 2 or 3 weeks, and keeping them going is a constant, a shuffle of a bunch of parallel threads coming together.
Yeah, it is. But I honestly like it. And the reason I like it is I do coverage and do videos on those updates for people that are just too busy to be able to read through all the patch notes or like are at work and just can listen to something on the side to do those updates verbally to let people know what's going on. And I think it's really cool what you guys have done. And with being the senior server engineer, I'm pretty sure you're working with Sean, the simulation engineer, and like Maggie, the world building engineer, to make sure that everything functions and works well together. Am I correct?
Oh, Megan, you mean? Yeah, the
Yeah,
world designer.
yeah, the world
Yeah.
designer.
Well, I've been a little bit hands off on the back end stuff lately. There were things that I had to do for some of the networking improvements that I think RAP has teased recently.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been working with our Unity partners in improving our netcode and its scalability. Um, what that will end up meaning for you guys is just a lot more entities in the server. Some more trees, more flora density, more buildings, and hopefully more players, right? That's really important for an MMO. Is how many players can you host? And the cost sustainability of your servers depends on that really, really critically.
Yeah, and that's something I want to bring up because I've noticed the density of like foliage and the amount of creatures you're getting on the plants have been increasing over time. Because when I first started playing, there were very few plants around, very few trees around, and creatures every so often. Excuse me. And what I like is now it's gotten to the point where we're really having to be careful where we fight these creatures because there's densely packed forests. So densely, I look at them sometime and I'm like, oh man, if we don't sort of clear out a little bit of this area, this could be a really bad forest fire with some of those creatures that like to shoot fireballs and stuff like that. And I've seen them go up in firefights. And that's really nice to see that it's fluid and I'm not seeing a hard frame rate drop. How hard was it to get to have the server to be able to handle that kind of stuff?
It's been a long process, I've been here about 4 years, and server did not perform this well when I started. Um, yeah, so there's a constant, push and pull of, hey, let's increase the amount of trees and creatures in the server, and then you get worse client performance, right? Because you're drawing more things on screen, and then
Yeah.
our rendering engineers need to do some upgrades to improve the FPS on the client, and then our networking starts to get bottlenecked when we have too many things spamming packets, and we have to, like reduce the amount of traffic we're sending through, and then we have to do things like server frame time is getting a little long. And it's just like a constant ongoing thing. You get 20,000 trees on the server all looking into the CA sim at the same time, going like, is it too hot? Am I burning? And we have to do workarounds and ways to cut down on the amount of computation we're doing, and also the network traffic we're sending. And it's just a constant ongoing thing.
Oh
You,
yeah.
you
I
just
mean,
have to do it one step at a time.
there's so much behind the scenes that you have to do. I mean, a regular multiplayer game is fairly simple. Keep track of the players, keep track of the NPCs. It already knows the environment. The environment's not changing. So it makes it very simple for something like Halo or Even like Destiny, that's or Destiny 2, that's a MMO light, has an easier system running in the background than what you guys have going, because you guys are keeping an eye on the terrain, what the terrain is made of, and how it's supposed to react. The water, the lava, the different trees, the different bushes and stuff like that. And like you said, the heat of those, to are they going to catch on fire or not? The melting points of things, and just so much. And then you got the different creatures that also affect those environments, and you're also changing elements too, such as turning sand into glass when you heat it up. And the fact that it does it fairly nice and smoothly, I'm surprised. But I'm pretty sure, like you said, I mean, how long have you been at the company working on all this to clear it up? Is another good question.
4 years next month.
4 years. Okay. Yep. I gotta say, the 4 years of work you've put in is really good work. In
Thank you.
a pre-alpha of an MMO, it runs fairly smoothly. Yes, there have been some hiccups, but that's to be expected in any pre-alpha. Things don't start going a bit smoother until after launch for an MMO.
Yeah, I
So
gotta say, I'm really proud of the team and how far we've come in this time, right? Like, there are so many things in Stars Reach that you just can't get in any game, and that's a huge achievement. And I'm not trying to like pat myself on the back, but like it is cool to be part of it.
yeah, it is, and that's the fun part, is you guys all work together so well, because I can't think of another MMO that I've been in the test of where it was this early in the making of the game that we were seeing, like you said, every 2 to 3 weeks, an update that adds new things to the game. It's not just balance changes and fixes, but you guys are adding more and more content. Is amazing. And these other MMO companies, they would have like 100 employees or more working on them, and you guys are what, like a 30-man team?
Yeah, about that much. Stars Reach was designed from the beginning to sort of be a live ops kind of game,
Hmm.
and that means this kind of content pays, right? The thing we're trying to solve, even with things like the CA sim, is like how long does it take for you to get an expansion in an MMO, right? And then
Oh
you
yeah.
blow through it in a weekend, and then you're waiting another 2 or 3 years for your next real like major bit of meat, right? Um, One of the nice things for us is like we don't have to do massive expansions for a new map. We hit a button and wormhole, like it's just there, right?
Yeah.
And as we increase the size of the map, it's going to be pretty close to like, hey, this is almost expansion size for other games, or close to like a Genshin Impact update, right? Where it's a whole new region suddenly gets unlocked, and in our game, it's just more like it's a new planet, and that's happening constantly. And with the CA sim, the rules of like, hey, sand just slumps into dunes this way, and reacts with water to make mud. All of that just applies everywhere. So we have to do the work once, front loaded, and then as you get further along in development, you kind of see that work pay off because then it's just multiplied, right?
Oh yeah, it's really cool, because I've been in these tests, and even like months ago, one of the worlds would crash, and like within minutes, you guys have it back up. And I know that's probably due to a lot of the work you've done on the back end for the servers, for them to get back up that quickly. How hard was it for you to do that type of work, to be able to get them to come back so quickly?
One of the things that helps our servers come back quickly is that everything is at runtime. So one of the things that can take a long time is if it's, it has a lot of like big stuff. And generally speaking, like Stars Reach is a pretty light game in terms of the sheer amount of assets we cram in. It's not that heavy, and even those assets are designed to be like loaded in at runtime, um, so it can cope with just coming up pretty quickly, and then um, pop in the trees as needed on the server, and then you can log in pretty quickly. The hard part is going to be when we start scaling to 4K maps, right?
Hmm.
Because that is 16 times the map size, which means 16 times the objects. And as we get more object density, we're potentially looking at millions of things on the server. On a client, you can kind of cheat and just load the things near you, but the server has to be aware of everything at once, and that's going to be the trick.
Yeah,
Which is why we've been working on things like scaling, right?
well, exactly, and that's where you got those tricks like LOD, level of detail, the FOV, field of view, and things like that that can help sort of put the pressure down on the client side of things. Server side of things, it needs to be aware of everything at all times because of where players are. If you have a plant where there's hundreds of players running around it, they're in all of the areas, so it's interacting with all portions of that server is really important. The good thing is it's not having to worry about the graphical side of things on most servers. So, you don't have it having to worry about that end of things. It just needs to know the code side of things, which is nice. But it's the fact that it's having to go through for your guys' server and figure out the things like, okay, has this material been changed? Like, has sand been turned into sandstone or glass? Is there anything below it material wise, or is it still there? Or is it gone because someone's telling, and things like that. So it's so much that I'm pretty sure for me, it would keep me awake constantly worrying about all those systems on the server side alone that has to handle. How do you handle that for your job?
Well, you rely on your team, right? We have John, who's a really great simulation engineer, and Nathaniel, who's really good on the rendering side, and turning that simulation data into meshes and stuff. Um, they're both extremely talented specialists in their fields, and yeah, we just work together on it. So does it keep me up at night that there's a bunch of simulation cells that have to think about, are they mud, are they glass? No, that's Sean's problem. Probably keeps him up.
You're just worried about the server stability part of things, right?
Well, I'm more in the gameplay side of things, right? So I
Mm.
have to worry about how it affects the player and how objects in the world are reacting to the sim. Um, Nathaniel's done a lot of good work on the rendering side, which is also used on the server because the server needs to turn that sim voxelish data into a mesh,
Yeah.
and that mesh has to match so that your physics, don't desync between the server and client. And that just relies on a ton of like really low level multi-threaded work.
Well, yeah, one of the things I really hate is the mesh not meeting up with collision, and so you're either floating in the ground or your feet or
Right.
legs are missing, type of thing. It just sort of breaks immersion. So having to make sure that those are in sync is a really important thing. And one of the things I keep an eye on, being on the graphical side of things, those just sort of pop out to me really quickly. And it's nice to hear that server side's handling that, because then that takes a little bit less stress off of the end player's computer. Now, speaking about end players' computers and things like that, have you guys gotten a base idea of what the expected requirements for a player's computer is going to be? And the reason I asked this so early is I have a fellow content creator. She doesn't have that strong of a machine. I told her about this game when I was helping her out with some things, because I'm helping her edit some videos, and she loves the idea. Just hearing the mechanics I told her about of this game, she's wanting to check it out. But it takes her hours just to edit and render out a short video. So
Right.
requirement wise, what do you guys are sort of aiming for right now?
So requirements are, I mean, as optimization changes, that's also a moving target, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I love my Steam Deck. I would love for Stars Reach to work on Steam Deck well. And um, we do have a lot of work going on right now in our render pipeline that'll help the client FPS quite significantly.
Hmm.
Um, like I was saying, right, it's a constant push and pull. Now we've gotten to the point where the server and the netcode are getting enough trees in the world that you actually just have too many trees on the client. And our
Yeah.
rendering pipeline needs to improve so we can just draw that number of triangles more efficiently and, generate LODs at runtime and things like that. And that's actually pretty well along. So you might be seeing that fairly soon.
Oh, that'd be really
Um,
cool to see a drop like that. But for like right now, if someone were to jump in the Wild Wormholes update, what would you recommend for the PC specs or to run okay?
hmm, I would definitely suggest something a bit more recent than the last 4 or so years.
Okay,
Um,
so within the last 4 or so years.
yeah, I
Okay.
mean something equivalent to like a 3070-ish would probably be okay.
Hmm.
Um, we do also do a lot of multi-threaded CPU stuff. So you mentioned that the server is doing some of the work for the client, and that's actually not true. The client is doing a lot of the same work in meshing the CA sim data, and it's just happening really fast.
Oh wow.
Um, but having more cores will help with that.
Yeah.
So if you're using something really old and it's like 4 cores or something, that might not be too hot. 8 probably fine. Um, but we're always improving it, and we're getting to the point where it's just about not making it faster, but doing less work. Work smarter, not harder.
Yeah.
Um, so we're going to be adding things like graphic settings. I'm not sure how many of them will make it in by 24/7, but I think that is a pretty big priority in making the 24/7 release more accessible. Is just turn off some of the features, right? Like you don't necessarily need really high resolution shadows further out, but right now we have a one size fits all,
Hmm.
and just having those options will go a long way.
Oh yeah, and those options is always really nice because then it allows you to sort of lower that bar for the requirement because they can
Right.
put things to lower resolutions, turn off shadows, things like that really can drop down, especially on the GPU is
Mhm.
the main thing. And I want to know with you know, everything ramping up towards 24/7, what's the main thing you're working on right now to get us towards 24/7?
The main thing I just finished working on was some of the network stuff, right? The other stuff I've been working on in parallel is about combat and gameplay, but that's not related to 24/7.
Mhm.
We can talk about that a little bit later if you
Oh
want,
yeah,
but
that's the next question, in fact.
right. Um, but yeah, getting our networking in a place where it can handle potentially a larger surge of players, that's been kind of important. Um, and also just to handle the sort of in parallel with the improvements we have on the rendering side, if we have like a bunch more trees and a bunch more creatures, being able to send that to you without like choking your network pipe is really important.
Yeah,
Otherwise, you rubber band everywhere.
oh yeah. And that's the thing I'm amazed about is it's very rare I see any rubber banding. In fact, I can't remember a time that my character even rubber band, which means you guys are doing a great job on the network code of things because there's a lot of times that I see rubber banding or glitched issues. I mean, I've been playing Dune Awakening and it's released, and there's been times where I've seen a disconnect in the net code because oh shoot, and my character does nothing. But yet my friend who I'm with, they shoot and they're a little bit closer to the server and they're shooting perfectly fine. And it's like, so wait a second, shooting is reliant directly on the server, and if it's not receiving the command, I made that mouse click, it's going to do absolutely nothing. Okay. I would rather I rubber band a little bit than not being able to shoot at all or do 10 clicks and get one shot. Whereas you guys are in pre alpha, every shot I do, goes through. Every step I make goes through. When I dig, majority of the time, it's working and everything's catching up. Every so often, I might see a little bit of lag when digging, but it's not terribly bad, which I greatly appreciate. And I know that's probably one of the things you're keeping an eye on as more and more things go through. That's probably one of your checklists is how badly does this affect frame rates and player interaction?
Yeah, and one of the things I've also been working on in recent months is more client prediction, right?
Hmm.
And that's a really key component in making a game feel snappy and responsive. It sort of breaks our brains a little bit when if you hit a button, nothing happens, and then you have
Yeah.
to wait for a message to go to the server, come back, and tell you, okay, now you shot a thing, right? And that just feels bad. People, call it funky or not responsive. Um, but ultimately, it's because there's latency, and the way you can get around that is by doing the same thing on the client that you think the server is going to do. So if you know that you're holding an Omni Blaster and it's going to shoot a projectile, you can just spawn it in advance. Even if the server disagrees, you just assume it'll agree because from what you can tell on the client, it looks about right. You have
Hmm.
enough battery, you have a good, you're not like climbing or something, you're standing still and aiming at something. Okay, let's just fire it. And then you tell the server, hey, like I preemptively fired this projectile. And when its snapshot comes in for the real actual server side authoritative one, you try to match it to what you predicted. And um, if it does match, your projectile keeps going. If it doesn't, it stops and the client gets corrected. But
Hmm.
you don't feel bad that there's no response to your input.
Exactly. And I 100% agree with that direction that the client is saying, okay, I've done this, and the server's just confirming that. If the server says, no, that didn't happen, then it just sort of fades away or does a miss or something like that is a very smart way of doing it because then the player's not going to get frustrated. They're not going to notice it. Whereas if they click and nothing happens, that's going to aggravate them. They're like, wait, I have enough of the ammunition. I have everything I need to make that shot. Why is this not working? What am I doing wrong? What's wrong with the game? That's the two direction players go. With the way you've set it up, and your Stars Reach team has set it up with the client doing that, they're not thinking that at all. They're not even noticing it, and it also adds more to the immersion. And that's a big thing, and that's the other thing that I like that you guys have done, especially with the client and the server side of things, is how immersive everything is. I find myself losing track of time and immersed in the world. Sometimes just looking around, especially with these wild wormhole planets. I am jumping on every playtest for at least 5 minutes to just check out the new world. Even if I don't have time to plan it, I just want to check out and see the cool stuff that you guys do and how it handles. And this whole entire time you guys have been running this, I think I've seen one day where there was a problem with the wild wormhole and it was getting a lot of crashes and stuff like that. So hopefully you're not sitting on a pile of crash bugs from us all from that day because I know a bunch of other testers when I was on in Discord chat with them were having the same issue. So did that day cause a big pile of crash reports that you're having to go through, and how are you handling going through all of that?
So I actually went in on that server that day. It was like a little bit after dinner time here, and
Mm-hmm.
I checked my phone, and I'm like, oh, people are starting to crash on the playtest. And um, I asked my wife nicely, hey, can I go look into that? And so I came in and tried to actually look at what the logs were saying about it. And um, sometimes the crashes are very compiled down to low level in our client,
Mm-hmm.
and part of that is for performance. a lot of the code in, especially in C# and Unity, we do have to compile it down to a very, very low level equivalent of C++, using Unity's burst library. And that allows us to get performance similar to C++. Um, but it also means we lose some of the nice logs around it.
Yeah.
Um, so capturing some of these crashes and big errors and stuff live in person actually makes a big difference.
Hmm.
Um, so I get a little bit more data if I bring in my debug build and connect to that server at the same time. Unless we have a good reproduction step for it, right? Like if
Yeah.
I can just do it locally in my own time, that's great. Unfortunately, this particular crash I couldn't reproduce on my own. Um, and I happened to come in at the end of the playtest. So there are a number of crashes we fixed with the next coming build, and I hope that maybe it was just one of them. But if it happens again, we'll try to catch it live. And you know, that's one of the big things that are really valuable about these pre-alpha tests. You know, like we can't test every possible scenario in house, and you know, the reproduction step sometimes can be just crazy.
Well, and that's
Um,
the reason why when I tell people to test, to not just test it once, but test it multiple times. See what
right.
your repro rate is. How many times out of how many times did you get it to happen? And I normally like to aim around 10. That way there's a good sort of percentage number. Did it happen 10% of the time? Did it happen 50% of the time? Type of thing. Because it's a lot easier to fix a bug that you can reproduce 100% than a bug that you can reproduce like 10 or even like 50% of the time. Is a lot
So gotta fix
harder of a
them though.
bug to fix.
Yeah.
You know, and
Uh,
that another point I bring up is that yeah, you guys can fix a bug, but there can be a bug lying underneath that bug. And so you fix the bug and you say you fix the bug, which is true, but there's another bug under that that sort of does somewhat the same thing or can cause something else to happen because that other bug's no longer happening. And I think players need to realize that. And I think the great thing is with the testers that are playing the game, we all know that this is pre-alpha. We all know that this is not the way the game's going to be when it goes live. So when we catch a bug, we're actually excited. We're actually, filling out bug reports and asking the developers, mainly Rodney, who's on a lot of the times, do you guys know about this? And what I really like is when we mention a bug and developers on, you guys are always, oh, cool, I want to see that. Because, there's nothing like seeing a bug and messing with a bug firsthand to help you fix the issue. And that's just really nice for us to be able to see being on Discord and chatting with the developers. I think that's why so many players are hyped about this game because they're getting to see the developer side of things on how you guys are doing some of this stuff. Have you noticed that in working from other games that there's a difference in how the players of Stars Reach sort of communicate with you versus how players communicated with you in previous games you've worked on?
Starsiege is actually my first game, so I
Oh, it's
consider
your
myself a
first
player
game.
first. Yeah.
Okay, so you have no past experience to go off of some players getting really upset and taking it like personal at times, like it's the end of the
I have
world.
experience. I have experience from the other side. So I
Yeah.
mean, I play MMOs all the time, right? And
Mhm.
yeah, I've definitely seen other communities where a lot of them are as constructive, and others that aren't. And I definitely know that we have a special community here with Stars Reach. That's for sure.
Yes, and I think it's because it's the type of game. I think because, I mean, Star Wars Galaxies had the same type of community where it was fairly helpful, friendly, because everyone had to work together to do things. And that's what Raph wants, is he wants people to work together. He wants like he said, a living world, a simulation. and I'm just so excited for this. But it's nice because it's the fact that the way he's running the company is nice because it's his overall idea of how he wants things. Then he hands things down to Dave, and Dave sort of refines that idea. Then he hands it over to the person that's going to be responsible for the different parts and lets you guys do your thing. And you normally don't see that in a lot of the game industries. A lot of the times, it's the game director will come to you and go, I want exactly this. Make me this. And especially when you hit into franchise such as like Halo. If you change the look of Master Chief, fans are going to get pissed. So you have to literally strictly set to it. And this, like I said, from the higher ups and moving down, everyone, including the community, gets a voice. How are you liking that work environment?
I love it. I love having kind of a long leash and getting sort of the freedom to just experiment and be creative at times.
Mhm.
Um, a grappling hook was when I implemented knockback into the game, and I was like, "Hey, Dave, look, we can have grappling hooks now because that's kind of the same thing as knockback, just in a
Yeah.
direction you pointed at."
Hmm.
And the meteors, that was also just like a totally random thing that I implemented because I thought it was fun. Um, like we were having a meeting and someone mentioned like, wouldn't it be cool if we had meteors? And I was like, meteors are just projectiles fired from the sky down to the ground. I can do that in like 30 minutes. And now we have meteors as like random events, and it's just awesome, right?
Uh, I'm sort of in wanting to bow down and worship you right now because I love the grappling. I will use the graph mesh. I'll run low on endurance. I'll hit that R button. I'll grab it. It will pull me to the wall, and you'll hang on to the wall and start climbing. I'm just like, this is a savior. The developer that worked on this is a genius and a smart person. Thank you so much because I would have taken so much fall damage, and it's so fun. I the only change I'd like to see to it in the future, and maybe a modification, is maybe some swinging to where we can grapple and swing instead of just a pull, would be really interesting to see.
Yeah, we've talked about that a few times, and it's been like a nice to have, but not critical for the game to ship kind of thing.
Yes, exactly. That's something that can wait for after release.
Yeah.
And I 100% agree with you. I mean, heck, even the grappling could have waited until after release, but I love having it in the game. It's a fun way to get around the world because I'll be on Rodian and there's that little chasm area, and I'll be like, why should I bother running around this or grav meshing over this when I'm at the right distance for the grapples just to pull me straight across? And so
Every
to
game is
me,
better
it's
with
it's
grappling
it's
hooks.
like a temporary bridge that doesn't affect the world in any way whatsoever, and I love it. And then the meteors, I love the fact that the meteors hit. They're great. They're fun. It's a new way of worrying about having to take damage and the different types of damage. But the other thing I love about them, especially like the big ones and the anti-gravium ones, is they put new resources into the world. Was that also your idea, or did someone else come up with that?
I think it was like an obvious next step. Um, we've seen sort of discussions in Discord as well between the community
Mm-hmm.
where people talk about the economy and how to sustain it if everything is finite, right?
Yeah.
And meteors always seem like an obvious deposit of let's add some materials back into the world,
Yeah,
or
exactly.
other random events, right? Like maybe a ship explodes overhead and now there's like create confetti, sort of like a loot pinata style event.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so there are going to be ways for us to sort of manage that finiteness and try to keep things interesting and keep people playing on worlds that they might have thought are no longer as fruitful as they were at the start. Um, but we're you've seen some of the public events, right? Like
Oh yeah.
um, the meteors for one, and things like replenishing the trees or
Hmm.
a boss mob spawns. So things like that. Will give us more mechanisms to add a bit more of the theme parky style gameplay that people are used to. Sort of like a Guild Wars 2 dynamic event, right?
Yeah, or like Warhammer Online. You know, the non-grouped events in there were really interesting. But I like the fact that your guys's isn't the same place every time. It moves
Right.
around, and that's really cool. Now, I got one other thing I want to bring up about the meteors. When the meteors and events were first introduced, did you go and watch content coverage of that? And what was your thought when you saw people responding to it?
You know, we work on this stuff for so long that we kind of take for granted how cool it is. And then seeing you guys react to things like meteors hitting trees and catching them on fire and starting a forest fire, it's like, wait a minute, this is really cool. I work with it every day, but it's like, it's actually groundbreaking.
Yeah. Well, I remember my roommate got in. He pledged, did the Reacher pledge, and he got into the game. First moment he was in the game, giant meteor comes down and takes his character out. And he's like, "What?" And he's laughing
Sorry.
hysterically. He's like, "What just took me out?" I'm like, "Did you hear the rumble?" And he's like, "Yeah." I was like, "That was a meteor coming down and hitting you, burying you alive." He's like, "That's so cool." And he runs back to get to his body, and he realizes he can't get to his body because there's a bunch of lava where his body is. He's have to wait for it to cool down. And he was getting ready to run away. I said, "Don't run away." I'm like, "Why?" Or he was like, "Why?" And I said, "Because pull out your terraformer and harvest the area where the meteor crashed." And he's like, "What's the point of that? It was all dirt." I said, "No. What do meteors have in them?" And he's like, "Different rocks, metals, and stuff like that." And I said, "Exactly. What do you think you're going to find in there?" He goes, "Well, naturally, you would think you'd find the remnants of the meteor." I said, "So dig there, see what you find." He was shocked that he was finding diamonds and lead and all this other stuff. He's like, "They're depositing new resources?" I said, "Yep." And he goes, "That's awesome. That's amazing that they're doing that." And before it came out, I was thinking to myself, how are they going to renew resources on plants if we're just mining things all the times and stuff like that? How is that going to happen? And now that you guys have meteors in there is an amazing thing. And the fact that we can take like copper from another planet and take it back to a planet that has a higher quality of copper and put that copper from that low quality planet into a high quality, and it converts the low quality copper into high quality copper is really interesting. It keeps longevity of people staying on a planet for a really long time. An amazing way of doing things, and it was good forethought, and to think that all came from your idea, especially for the meteors, to get that to happen is amazing. Because I even like the smaller ones, like the acid meteors, the flame meteors. Just watching them, I don't need to be close to them. Just watching the effects of them streaking across the sky is enjoyable to watch. So I want to thank you for actually coming up with actually doing meteors, and the grappling is amazing. I do want to reach back to you. You mentioned combat earlier on, and the last developer I interviewed was John Brown, the animator, and he was talking about how he was working on melee animations. So I take it that what you're working on is the melee end of things for client and server side then?
Yes and no. Melee is not too different from range under the hood,
Hmm.
but there are some core assumptions that melee combat makes in terms of your functionality that range doesn't necessarily. The hard part for range is spawning projectiles predictably.
Hmm.
Melee doesn't spawn new things, so that's not a
Yeah, it
problem for
just has to
that.
make
It's usually
sure
just
that, you know, animation, collision of the weapons is the main thing.
it depends. Okay, so this is one thing we found a lot internally too. People
Hmm.
have a different understanding of what melee is, and it varies quite significantly. Some people think like, more Mordau, sort of like chivalry style, where you have to have the sort of inverse kinematics of like your weapons actually impact each other, right?
Hmm.
Um, More modern takes these days are like Warframe or Genshin Impact, and they have more of a. It's basically just AOE's at close range, right?
Yeah.
And that's sort of the approach we're taking as well. So it's more in line with um, that type, not so much like we have to focus on the sort of actually connecting and
So it's
um,
more along the lines of if your character does an arc swing, is the
right.
model of the other creature in that arc?
Yes.
Instead of,
And
okay, did the model of the melee weapon actually go through the other creature's model or whatever? And I honestly, I like that a little bit more because then it does several things. One, it makes for more interesting combat, like you were talking. Warframe is a great example with their melee and the spinning around and stuff like that is really nice and fun to see. And I can see a lot of people, that guiding people to melee because of that. And I'd like to sort of see that for ranged combat of that, the spinning gun slinger type gun fu feel would be interesting too. But the fact that you guys are actually, first focusing melee wise in sort of that direction is really nice. And that gives a lot of freedom to the animators like, John Brown to get creative with what they do and can make the game a lot funner. And it's good to know about that. So with this combat stuff that you've been working on, can you give us any teasers of what we can expect?
so what you just mentioned just now actually is part of what I've been working on.
Mhm.
You you want more of a gun fu sort of like stylized approach to range combat too, and for that you need to have separate animations per attack or per per section of an attack.
Mhm.
Um, you want things like being able to chain from one swing to another or one type of shot to another, right?
Mhm.
Um, that's not currently in the build right now, but parts of that are in the build disabled for you guys.
Yeah.
Um, there's a gun in the game actually in the production build right now that is called the Avi tool, and if the description says it, your name better be Avi if you have this. So you can't spawn it
I'm
in,
afraid
but
of what this Avi tool does.
it's mostly just demo stuff for me to show designers like, hey, this is how some of the new stuff works.
Hmm.
Right? There are a lot of tools like that in the game that are like, this is how we can use our new physics APIs or a scripting engine to implement cool things. Like maybe a year ago, I put in like a sticky mine gun, and I've shown people in playtests like, there's a sticky mine
Oh.
gun, and there's like a boomerang gun. I think one time I gave it to Jestier just
Mhm.
for fun because he was there right before a server wipe, and he had it for like 5 whole minutes. Um, but we have a lot of stuff in there that is just like me playing around with physics APIs, and it's meant to be for designers. But we haven't really fleshed out the combat trees yet because a lot of it has been waiting on this sort of back end plumbing work.
Mhm.
Um, we don't want to keep building combat tools and then going back and redoing them and making them in the new system, and that's just a nightmare scenario, right?
Well, it's also a waste of
Um,
time and resources. And
Yeah.
you guys are what I like about this is you guys are streamlining that with the whole entire way you guys work. You're thinking ahead, figuring out where you want to go, and then implementing the work instead of going, well, we think we want to go this way. Let's go that way, see how it works. And then also you're looking at what players are doing. For instance, the farming. The reason farming got held back is you were seeing what like groups like Dunk were doing in the world, and you guys internally went, you know what, our farming just isn't good enough. We don't think this is good enough for even what players are doing in the world. We need to retool our idea of what we were doing with farming, and that saves on time and resource, and also developers like you don't feel like their work was put to waste for nothing, and you see that there's a positive finish line to what the work you're doing is, and that's gonna make you feel good in the fact that it's not because I've been on development teams where you do the work and there's like it's nice but we changed our mind, we're gonna go a different direction, and then all that work's wasted. I take it there's not seen that much of that at Stars Reach.
Don't get me wrong, there is some of that, and that's part of the iterative process, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes you have to see something in game and go, you know what, maybe we can take a better approach here. That's fine, as long as we don't over invest time into polishing it too much before getting to that point.
Yeah.
Um, so that's one really big thing is we have to get things in at least in a like functional state as early as possible so we can short circuit that kind of decision.
Hmm.
Um, but generally speaking, especially like these days when we're trying to really focus on getting things shipped for 24/7 and beyond, we have to be really, really pragmatic with what we focus on.
Yeah.
So yeah, we don't really get too much of that these days.
That's good. Now, back to sort of the combat stuff. When you were talking about that some melee stuff's being worked on, some range stuff's being worked on, are we talking expanding current skill trees, or are we talking new weapons for the combat?
New weapons. The
New
current
weapons.
trees are basically placeholder.
Hmm.
So um, existing weapons are fine.
Yeah.
I think they're okay, but I also think they're not suitable for long-term progression for an MMO, right?
Hmm.
You need a lot more types of skills to choose between for your specials on E and Q,
Yes.
and you need like a little bit of build craft, right? Like, where's the fun in just unlocking new specials and spamming them over and over?
Hmm.
There's a bit of like you got to go into your tree and feel like you made your build and or made it your own, right?
Yes.
To me, combat is a lot like cosmetics or like character creation. It
Hmm.
is reflective of you and your playstyle and your personality. And I would love for Stars Reach to have just massive, massive like arrays and arrays of tools that you guys can pick and choose between. But that'll probably happen like much further along.
Yeah, exactly. It's gonna grow over time, and that's one of the things I like doing, especially in like City of Heroes. I'll play the same archetype and power set, but I'm always changing around the enhancements that affect that power. So like, I'll have one of my favorites to play is an electric blaster, and you know, one time I'll play him and I'll be stacked heavily for accuracy, so he's hitting every shot, but it's doing very little damage. Another time I'll heavily stack it for damage, so he's hitting every so often, but it's doing more damage. Other times I'll stack it for endurance drain, so it's draining the endurance of the mob quicker so that they can't attack as often or as much. And it's those nice little changes that you can do to your character that causes the player to make multiple characters or constantly change out what their playstyle for their character is, what they're wanting to do at that time, which creates more gameplay time and longer gameplay time and a lot more fun for the player, because the more choices you give to a player to do something in a game, the longer I think they're going to stay. Because if you just give them a build game, once they've built what they want to build, they're going to walk away. but you give them multiple different ways to build, and then on top of that you throw in like maybe some combat aspects. So they'll go build and then they'll go do combat and then they'll come back and build something different, and different choices like that I really like. And that's the direction that I like that Stars Reach is taking. Is there's so many options and directions you guys can take. So how does that work with you working on the client and server side of things, with figuring out how to organize and order things? Is it more of Dave saying we need this now, or are you actually organizing your workflow also?
I've pushed a lot for these combat upgrades from my side.
Hmm.
Um, Raph and Dave have to think big picture, and
Yeah.
they've also got all these designs for non-combat features that are really important to them and to a lot of players. And I'm kind of the combat evangelist on the team, so I'm the one going like, "But wouldn't it be cool if we could, do this, right?" And so I guess I've been a little bit lucky in that I can self-direct some of my work, because I bring it up to Raph and Dave, and they go, "That sounds great. When can we have it by?" And I'll try to pull away from some of the other work when I have time, away from optimizations and crash fixes and stuff, and say, "All right, I'm going to set aside a few days for a bit of combat enhancement and try to get some of those things in." And that's kind of why it's been a little slow coming along, because I'm trying to squeeze it in with other things.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, one of the great things about Stars Reach is that it is a very like horizontal progression type game, and we can sort of add things modularly, and it doesn't break the balance of the game, or for long-term progression. If like you've really like mastered out a skill tree and then a new one appears that gives you a different option, you can respec and try to go into that, right?
Hmm.
um, so I think that direction is really going to help us in creating more player agency and customizing what you want, but also like in giving you that decision, like the thought of having to make a choice and figure out like, oh, something cool came out and it's kind of, along my lines of gameplay. Do I want to change out some of my skills and pick up some of those? And, um, Raph's book, Theory of Fun, it talks about how fun is really linked to learning, and it's how our brain sort of decodes the world and rewards itself for learning new things. Um, so if there's constantly like new combat trees coming up, even if you have your trusty Omni Blaster, you're learning new things and how to like combine them or mix and match them with your Omni Blaster. I think that's great. It's not like, okay, I'm max level and my skill tree is not going to change on this class for like the next 3 expansions.
Hmm. Yeah, it's funny that you bring that up, that you're the one sort of pushing for the combat, because in all honesty, with Dave's resume of working on Tribes 2 and working on PlanetSide 2 and EverQuest Next, I thought he would be the one sort of championing and forefronting the push for combat naturally.
He used
I'm
to, but
pretty
he
sure
also
he
has a lot
he
of other
does
things.
some of that, but
Yeah.
it's nice that there's another person sort of pushing there. But then there's other people like Megan, the world builder, who's pushing towards the more cozier gameplay and the building and crafting of the world and manipulating of the world type of stuff. And so, everyone's sort of pulling every which direction. So Dave's got to sort of manage that all, with all you guys going, oh, we should do that. We should work on this. We should work on that and stuff like that. So he can't just sort of favoritize you, which, in my mind, I think he would favoritize you and go, okay, let's work on some more combat just because it's Dave. If it was Raph, he would be more of the simulation of the world and the different things you can do in the world. Just from him working on Ultima Online and Star Wars Galaxies, and the fact that he loves simulation worlds, which, got me to love them too with the way he does them. Um, what I want to move on to is, I just got a few more questions for you, and then I'm going to let you go. When you get a chance to actually sit down and play Stars Reach, what do you enjoy doing in the game? What's the funnest thing for you?
I still want combat to have these improvements I'm working on before I think
Mhm.
that's really going to be fun for me. So while I do gravitate towards combat, I think more of the time I like running around and watching what you guys are making and the things you're building. Um, I have like, hold on, let me pull up my Steam. I think I have like several thousand hours in Stars Reach at this point.
I wouldn't
Uh,
be surprised.
yeah, about 3,000. So
Yeah, well, considering you're able to access the servers when we're not.
right. I mean,
You
my
you
local
you
computer
you
is a
get
server.
amazing powers that every person listening to this right now is just drooling, going, "I wish I could do that." Because we're have you been on when the servers are going down in Discord? So
Yeah, I have a
you've
few
heard
times.
all of us begging and crossing our fingers that Rodney forgets what time it is so the servers can stay up. How does that
He
make you
takes mercy on
feel?
you guys. Look, you guys have been amazing, and it's so motivating seeing people really care about this game as much as we do. Um, and especially for me coming from outside game dev into game dev,
Mhm.
it's been even more humbling that like I'm not someone like Raph or Dave with all this pedigree in previous games, and you guys like my work enough that you want to take time out of your day to keep playing. I love it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, a lot of us are excited for 24/7. We cannot wait for 24/7 because the game's already addictive. It's got me doing things I never thought I would do in games. I never thought I'd be into mining. Not in a million years. I hate harvesting in all other MMOs and crafting games. It's just the boring. In Stars Reach, it's what I spend a majority of my time doing because of the gameplay mechanics that I put in there. And, going back to the meteors, when the world events were put in and the first meteor happened, first thing I did was I looked around to see where the meteor was going to land to make sure it wasn't going to land on me. Because I was just
Yeah.
starting to dig a tunnel and I was freaking out. Another time when I was constantly seeing the small rain showers, but then when I saw the big one and it hit and do lava, my first thought was, oh, that's cool. I think I'm going to get some, basalt out of this and stuff like that from the lava. I get down there, I'm digging, I'm getting the diamonds and other metals that were in that meteor. I'm like, oh my god, another hook to mining. You jerks. Making me love something I hate. How dare you? And now I get to throw you onto that list of people that I get to sort of go curse your name for making me enjoy something I normally hate. So, I mean,
Well, here's
that's
another
a
layer
good
to
thing.
it. I was playing with Lemonis and Lyric in one of the streams earlier,
Mm-hmm.
and we had the same meteor impact in Zaraxa, the desert planet,
Yeah.
and we went rushing forward to it, and we're like, I think it landed around here. There's like a bunch of glass from the heat of the meteor,
Mm-hmm.
and we're digging, and we're like, where's the diamond? And then we get a little deeper, and we go, oh, it's sunk into the sand because
Yeah.
it's denser.
Uh-huh.
So over time, as we have more, server uptime with 24/7 and stuff, you're gonna be able to like have archaeological digs for meteors that drop diamond when people weren't around, and like you're gonna have to go find them underground.
Well, and that's the thing I love because I also play No Man's Sky, and all their resources are on the surface. So there's no real reason to dig really down deep unless you want to just for the fun of it. Stars Reach went the other direction. You want this resource? You gotta dig deep. And sometimes you find small little patches of it. Other times you find big, huge veins of it. Like last Tuesday when I was playing, I was out looking for marble, and the new wild wormhole planet had a bunch of marble in it. And in most areas, it was underneath the peat dirt. I was like, I don't feel like digging this out. So I wanted to find some that was on some like slate or, some kind of rock material so that it wouldn't be constantly burying in and having to shore it up and stuff like that. And I found an area. I was like, okay, this looks like a small little deposit. I'll go get this. Next thing you know, I'm creating this big underground area that I'm like, okay, I'm pretty sure I'm going to have to shore this up, or this whole entire thing's going to collapse on me of a vein. And that's just amazing because when I jump on tomorrow, it's going to be a different world and the resources are going to be in a different spot. And even with Rhodian, when we were resetting Rhodian, or you guys were resetting Rhodian every time, the first time I jumped on, Dave had found a big deposit of gold and created this mine shaft. And that was the first time I got dragged into liking the mining. And then the next playtest, I went to that same area, dug in the same spot, went the same direction Dave went. Resource was not there. And that's just so interesting that you've been able to create a server that can do that and randomly generate things in such a nice way that I can already see that each world is going to be different in so many ways, and we're just at the start of this. I mean, do you worry about all the more varieties that's going to be put in, or how the server's going to handle all that?
Not really. I think we can cope with that. The fun of it is going to be in keeping track in the design of it and
Mm.
the balance side of things, and um like the way good proc gen feels less just like randomly generated is if you have a lot of layers and layers of fairly simple but complex in the way they interact kind of rule sets.
Uh-huh.
And that's exactly what, the CASM is equipped to do. Under the hood, it's doing very simple things, but then they layer together over and over and over. And then it starts feeling like, oh, this is just intuitive. This is how real life behaves, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like sand turns into glass and then, diamonds sink. Like
Yeah.
that's cool. Um, but under the hood, it's quite simple. But keeping track of all these rules is actually it's really tricky. And in an MMO, especially, like
Yeah.
it's already a collection of little sub games that all sort of operate a little differently. And you
Mm-hmm.
kind of see that with surveying and mining and building and combat and cooking and crafting. And it's like all these things we have to keep track of them in our brains and you know not lose track of it all. It's just it's a big game, you
Well,
know.
I can only imagine how thick the dev doc for this game has already gotten. And it's not even fully there yet in its size and scope. And in fact, I don't even think I see it ending with this being sort of a live service type game, the way you guys are designing it. That's got to be a lot of stuff that you guys are going to have to fall back on in the dev doc. And I mean, it's going to be probably thicker than the Bible by the time you guys are done.
There are things where we go, oh, I forgot I did that. Like currently in the build, did you know that if you go in like slightly warm but not too hot water, it heals you?
I found that out. In one of the worlds that they put in, I was swimming around. It's the one where they have the big lake with the island in the middle.
Yeah, it's scary on.
And I'd taken some damage. I was running from some mobs. I ran into the water, and I noticed after the mobs had gone away, and I ran into the section of water, I started seeing green numbers. I'm like, is this healing me? Yeah, my bar's going up. And I just started staying there. I backed out and moved. I'm like, wait, are these hot springs? I asked Rodney. He's like, yeah, there's hot springs and they do heal you. And people are like, wait, what? So what I really like is the fact that you guys have created a system with the simulation and server in the way it reacts that even surprises you, the developers. How does that make you feel?
Well, my end goal is a game that's not trivially solved by a wiki. So that feels great. If like if we can't keep track of it all, then surely like you guys might still have some discovery to do a year or two into the game's launch.
Yeah.
And that'll be fun.
Well, I mean, just hearing Raph get so excited by seeing things happen in his game, that's gonna make you feel good. Like when someone dug down in a lake, hit lava, and caused a geyser to go off. And he gets giddy about that. The time he accidentally flooded Beanstalk City is a great story. He laughs about that. That's got to put a smile on your face that the guy who's this overall idea, the systems you're working on are making him act like a little kid in a way.
Yeah, Raph's enthusiasm is absolutely infectious. And I used to watch like GDC videos of him talking about game design before I
Mhm.
started here. And when I first met him, I was like, oh, he's just like the GDC videos. He's
Yeah.
actually just a very, he's a very transparent, honest person who is just himself all the time. And when he's excited about stuff, it shows.
it,
And yeah, I think it's great to have someone like that leading a company.
It is. And that's what gave me faith in the project and why I personally backed it when the Kickstarter came live. Is, Raph is that kind of person. Same with Dave. And the fact that, I was in the test and I was hearing all of the developers talk. And when they would talk about a gameplay mechanic that they want to see in the game, they're like, we're going to try to do this. We cannot guarantee this, but this is our dream. This is our hope. This is the direction we want to go. Like, for instance, spaceships. Yes, spaceships are going to be in. He said that 100%. I know it can happen because, well, Star Wars Galaxies. He did in Star Wars Galaxies. Of course, it's going to happen here, right? But the fact that he said to start off with, you're just going to have a preset, already defined starship that maybe you can customize the colors on. But we want to move to modularly build starships so that your starship can have a unique silhouette type thing. And that's our end goal, what we want to try to do. The fact that he in advance sets expectations is nice. And is that your normal way that you like to see things done? Or are you more of, I'm going to aim for a goal and it's that goal or nothing?
I think there's no choice but to be iterative with a smaller team. Like you have
Mm,
to work in parts and try to find what's good enough for now, even though it's not necessarily like the final vision.
mm.
And I mean, we things cost time and money, right? Like we don't have the
Yes.
luxury to have infinite funding and take infinite time to get to the perfect game. But as long as we put out a game that is fun and people are enjoying it, then that's good enough for me.
That's good. So I only have two more questions for you. The first of the two is how long until we see the maps expand from the 1 kilometer by 1 kilometer area and start getting up a little bit bigger?
So we have worked on a lot of the prerequisite pieces recently. Um, the one big thing that we'll still need to address before going to larger maps is the bandwidth of the CASIM map data.
Hmm.
Um, there's sort of the challenge of everything being dynamic and the world, you know, needing to be immersive and balancing it with a network game. Um, like you want to see that mountain over there in the distance, right?
Yeah.
Like that's a cool moment. It gives you a place to go look at, but that also means you need to stream down data for that mountain and what voxels compose it and how it's supposed to look. And if you multiply that out by a lot of players, that gets really expensive. So
Yes.
um, there are strategies we know we need to do to make that better, and that is stuff we'll work on soon. But I think that's the last like gigantic piece we need before we get to that point. Um, the upcoming renderer upgrades will help a lot in getting to that size, and yeah, the networking stuff we've been doing that also helps
Yeah.
because if we have a bigger world, you need more trees, you need more creatures and stuff. So
Okay. And finally, what's something
and,
that you can
um,
tease for us in the next for the next update?
the next update is going to be a little feature light because it's been a lot of back end work.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it will have some of these networking upgrades under the hood, but you won't really see too much unless we, do manual things on the dev side.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that said, it is really important in getting us to 24/7. So
Yes. Because I mean, if you don't have good network going for 24/7, it's not going to be an actual 24/7 because you're going to have to constantly reboot the servers and stuff like that. And that's one thing I always hate when a live service game goes live is every day or every 5 hours there's a server reset and downtime. It's like, well, this isn't really 24/7 because you're not really keeping the servers up 24/7. And that's really important. So it's good to hear that there's going to be network stuff done to really move towards 24/7. And to me personally, because of how quickly you're coming up with these updates, I don't mind that one update, that an update every so often is more back end heavy. We're going to be seeing updates like that and gonna need them because then that also means less lag, less issues, and less rubber banding and a bunch of different things like that. That's really gonna help out. But Abby, I want to thank you for your time of sitting down and answering my questions. I want to thank you viewers for watching this. I hope you found it entertaining. Have a great day.